What's up, guys? Mason the Brock Henderson here, and this is Loki Season 2, Episode 5, Science/Fiction. So, I'm kind of confused about some of the stuff that happened in this episode. I do hope we get some answers for it, because if not, then I'm still going to be sitting here confused. And maybe some of it is supposed to be left up to interpretation. Maybe some of it will be explained later in a future Marvel property. I kind of hope we just get those answers, though, because some of this, I feel like I'm going to be left disappointed if I don't get the proper answers for them. First and foremost is the time slipping. I kind of figured that was going to come back up later. I kind of figured we might get an answer for that. I still don't really know if we've gotten the full answer yet. So first of all, we still don't know why this started happening to begin with. I mean, it started happening after Sylvie kicked him through the time door at the end of time. So don't know how that caused him to suddenly be able to have this ability to slip through time. But I did kind of have an idea that he was somehow in control of it. Maybe not consciously, as we saw, but somehow he had that ability and he was using it whenever he needed it earlier on. Like, for instance, whenever OB needed to get this information about the time slipping, he then subconsciously uses the ability to travel back in time to a past version of OB and give him this information with enough time to create something with it. So we find out he has the ability to control it. Still don't exactly know how he can control it. He did say the Who at the end of it, and assuming he's not talking about the band, I'm assuming it's probably something to do with maybe the people. Like, it's the people he cares for that allows him, because we saw he was time slipping to all these locations where all of these people that he cared about were. You know, the McDonald's that Sylvie worked at, the sports shop that Mobius worked at, what abandoned factory, I guess, that OB was located, Alcatraz with Casey, the hospital with B-15. So he was going there, I'm assuming, because of the people. But is that the whole answer? Is it just because, oh, he needs to think about these people and then that allows him to control it? If so, that does seem pretty vague, and it does seem almost a little cheesy. It's all about friendship, guys. Friendship is the answer, and he's able to control his powers now. So I don't know if that's what they're going to go with, but it definitely seems like that's what it's leaning towards. As far as the loom itself, I do hope we also get some answers as far as why Loki was the only one that remained after the loom exploded. Seemingly Sylvie was the only other one of the group that remembered what happened. I don't know if that's also because she's a Loki, but if so, why was she also transported to the McDonald's where she was working before? Did she choose to go there? Did she travel there after the explosion and Loki just didn't see that? I hope we get some answers about that as well, because it does feel weird that Loki was the only one that stayed at the TVA after the loom exploded. The only answer I could possibly think of is maybe he doesn't have any place to go back to. Maybe somehow his original timeline is gone, but with that being said, he was brought out of the sacred timeline, I thought, but I don't know. There's definitely a lot of confusion there that maybe we're already supposed to know some answers for, but if so, then I might have already missed it. But with the loom exploding, I also hope we do delve into a bit of, is that why all these timelines were getting spaghettified here at the end? Is it because the loom no longer existed? And if so, does that mean that time does not exist without the loom? How does all of that work? Because it seemed like time still existed, it's just the loom was keeping everything sort of together and maybe flowing down one path. But seemingly, without the loom, all of these branches started disappearing. So does that mean that the sacred timeline would also disappear without it? Is the spaghettification caused because normally the loom sort of weaves it all together, and if you're weaving it together, it's supposed to keep everything sort of tight? You know, it's not going to fray. So is that why all the spaghettification is happening? Because there's no loom to keep everything woven? I don't know. I feel like that's kind of what they're implying here, but it's not confirmed. And I just hope that there is some confirmation. I hope it's not all just left open to interpretation, because when you do that, you leave your audience with a lot of questions. And there are some times that it can work because it gets your audience talking about it. It gets your audience theorizing about what's happening. But whenever you're a part of a bigger picture like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and you have something that's left so open-ended, that's a problem, because then when you get to other properties that do delve into the time travel shtick, now you're going to be dealing with all of these questions that were brought up by a show like Loki, and then they weren't answered. And then you get to this other stuff, and like in game, we have everybody traveling back in time, or Deadpool and Wolverine, you have Deadpool traveling through time. And yes, it is kind of fun and goofy. It does sort of leave these questions that the audience, I think, are going to be a little bit more distracted by more than anything. And I don't think that's what they're going for. I think they're more so going for, they want the audience to be thinking about it and asking questions and really trying to dig into the lore. I also am kind of curious about He Who Remains. How much of this did he foresee? Did he foresee any of this, or was it just he saw up to the point of his death, and then that's as far as he saw, and maybe he assumed what happened after, maybe he saw all what happened after as well. I don't know. I don't know how much control he has over these future events as well, and if he does have some control over it, did he foresee what Loki is doing now? Did he foresee him time slipping and going back before the loom exploded to fix that? I don't know. And I kind of hope we also get those answers too, because I do think He Who Remains is still kind of a mystery that could be explored a bit further. Now, granted, we know Kang is not going to be around for much longer, so it's not like I want his story to continue past Loki, but definitely for this final episode, I would like to see what were his final goals. Like, did he want all of this to happen? Did he want Loki to be able to time slip? Did he want Loki to go back and fix the loom before it explodes? Or was there some grander picture that Loki is now interfering with? That's the type of question that I'm hoping we get some answers to. Yeah, I think that's kind of all there is. It's a lot of interesting mysteries that I feel like this episode is either going to be really good or really bad, depending on how the final episodes goes. How many of these questions get answered, how many of these theories that I'm having, how many of them make sense, how many of them don't make sense. It's one of those, hindsight is going to make this episode better or worse, I feel. So with that in mind, go ahead and jump into the final episode, and we'll see how all this wraps up. I will see you there in just a second. And finally, episode 6, Glorious Purpose. Probably one of the best finales of most of the Marvel TV shows, if I'm being honest, because it does feel like a finale. It doesn't feel like it's building up to something else. Obviously, Loki is probably still going to be around. I don't know if we'll ever touch on where he ended up, but I think this is a good wrap up for Loki season 1 and season 2, what it's all been building to, him realizing this purpose that he has to essentially keep all these timelines alive. I think it's a really well done story. It's probably some of the best writing that Marvel TV shows have had, if I'm being honest. But first and foremost, to address some of the issues that I had that I talked about in the last episode, the questions that needed answered, they answered pretty much all of them. The only one that I still have some questions on, but I think it's one of those that you could interpret it a few different ways, is the one line from He Who Remains, where he basically says Loki's time slipping. He basically says something along the lines of, he paved the way for that. So I don't know if that means that he is the one who gave Loki the time slipping abilities, or if something he did caused it. Maybe his TemPad somehow brought that about. But that's about the only question I really have. And honestly, all you really need to know is that he is responsible for Loki getting those powers. And I think the big thing is he's building towards Loki realizing that he's got two choices. Either he lets everything reset because of the loom, or he kills Sylvie and lets He Who Remains basically keep in control and keep everything working how it does. And I think that's a pretty solid answer for me, because it shows He Who Remains is very obviously ahead of the game. He's thinking a few steps ahead, but I don't think he would necessarily have predicted that Loki would be willing to not only destroy the loom, but then also take its place. Because if Loki destroys it, I think normally all these timelines would have died. But he's able to take its place, give the timelines their power so that everybody can still survive and go on living their lives. And I think it's a very unselfish choice, which I think is probably why He Who Remains probably didn't see that one coming. But I think it's a very solid conclusion for Loki's story, and it gives him, I mean, like the title of the episode, it gives him his glorious purpose, a reason to exist. And, well, technically, as He Who Remains says, it is him losing in a way. It's him giving up his life. It's probably the best way for his story to end. It's probably the most satisfying conclusion for him. Even though he is giving up all these chances to be with these people he cares about, he still gives them their opportunity to live their own lives, to exist in all these different timelines where they should have existed to begin with. And I think that for him is going to be probably the best ending that he could come to. But as far as the Loom is concerned, I think that's a very satisfying explanation as to what was going on in the last episode, seeing that it's there as a failsafe to basically almost reboot if it gets too much to handle and essentially erase all these other branch timelines and leave only the sacred timeline. Yeah, it makes sense. It definitely was not how I was thinking the Loom was operating, so I am glad that they sort of kept me guessing all the way until the very end for that one. And seeing that, like I said, He Who Remains clearly planned ahead for this, it shows what a good villain he can be. And while, as I said before, I do think that Jonathan Majors unfortunately was just not able to bring a lot of entertainment, I don't think, out of this character, I do think the character of Kang would have been a pretty solid villain for everybody to go up against, because it's very clear that all these different versions of him are very intelligent and are planning for every eventuality, every possibility that exists, just to make sure that they come out on top. And I don't know how it all would have worked. Obviously, there's this big war that they were building up to, the War of the Kangs. I don't know if the Council of Kangs would have eventually turned on each other, and maybe that's what they were building towards. But I think we would have seen him trying to almost outplay himself. It would have been kind of an interesting setup, and seeing how the Avengers and all of the heroes would have been trying to stop him. I think there could have been something there. There could have been something entertaining that I am a little sad that we're not going to see now after seeing this show. But at the same time, I still think it probably would have had its rough points if we continued on with Kang's story. But outside of that, I think seeing all the different characters and where they end up, a lot of it makes sense. Obviously, Hunter, we did see her in Deadpool and Wolverine working for the TVA, so I guess I should have realized she would still be there. But seeing Mobius get to basically step out and almost retire and get to just see what the outside world is like, I think it's a satisfying conclusion for him as well. Sylvie, kind of the same thing. She's now out there, free to do whatever she wants. I assume we'll probably see her coming back pretty soon as well. But looking back at this season as a whole, I think it's a pretty solid season. A little shaky at first. A couple of episodes I felt like maybe were burdened by the fact that you have 6 episodes and there's not a whole lot of story here, so you do have to fill up some of that time. You have to make certain moves with your story that does extend it a bit, so that way you're able to extend it through the entire 6 episodes. But overall, I think when you look back on it, it really does flow very well. It makes sense for the characters to make the decisions that they did, but the pacing as well, I think after episode 3 it really hits its stride, and you just feel like the flow is very natural. I feel it feels like everything is progressing at a normal pace, and I think the intensity is there as well. I do feel there were moments when I was at the edge of my seat wondering what was going to happen next, and I don't think I get that way if I'm not interested in the show. I never really felt that about Secret Invasion. I never felt that during She-Hulk, so to feel that again about a Marvel property, I'm glad. I'm glad that they managed to catch my interest enough. I don't know if this is going to carry on past this. The next Marvel thing I've got is the Marvels, and I'm just not at all looking forward to that. But I do have hope, though, that there will be those little diamonds in the rough of what has been post-Endgame Marvel that will still get me excited, get me interested in watching Marvel again. And I have to hope that that is going to be the norm in the future, but we'll see. It really depends now that they've decided to move on past Kang, now they've decided to focus on Doctor Doom. And I hope after some of the bombs that have happened for Marvel, I do hope that they're kind of looking at it and going, we need to take a step back and we need to focus on what I think Loki Season 2 brings, which is making sure your writing makes sense. And also, definitely taking a step back from the bigger picture and not just focusing on, well, we got to build up to this big thing and then this big thing, but really focusing in on the characters. What was Secret Invasion about? It was about so many things. What was She-Hulk about? I mean, that was just a mess. That was not well written. I think Loki, not only is it about your main character, it's keeping it very focused in on Loki and the TVA, but I think the writing as well, it was really solid. It really brought me in and got me invested in the story. And that's a really nice thing to feel, again, about a Marvel show. But with all that being said, those are my thoughts. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. What are your thoughts on these final 2 episodes as well as this season as a whole? Let me know. We can talk about and discuss all that good stuff. Leave a like and subscribe for future Marvel reviews. Also check out the channel. We have a lot of TV show reviews as well as a couple Let's Plays on there. So check those out if you have time. But until next time, I hope you guys have a great day. I will talk to you all later. Peace out.